was my dad. There's, from me, the persona, it never really touched me.
That when I started going to school, I was bigger than all the kids. And
Andre the Giant's daughter, rarely seen and even more rarely heard from, has a presence that might just outshine his in a way no one expected. Behind the scenes, beyond the ring, and beneath the legend, lies a story far more personal and surprising. She didn't follow his path, but what did she choose instead? That's where things get interesting. Before you assume you know the legacy of the giant, think again. The truth is bigger than the myth, and she's the one carrying it. Let's pull back the curtain on what really happened after the giant fell. Giant genes or giant myth? Andre the Giant, born Andrei René Roussimoff, became one of the most recognizable figures in sports entertainment history due to his extraordinary size. Standing at over 7 feet 4 inches tall and weighing more than 500 pounds at his peak, his massive stature was not just a quirk of nature. It was the result of a rare condition called acromegaly. This disorder, caused by a benign tumor on the pituitary gland, results in the excessive production of growth hormone, which in turn leads to abnormal growth of bones and tissues. Acromegaly in Andre's case began to show early signs during adolescence, but due to limited medical understanding at the time and his rural upbringing in France, it went undiagnosed for years. While this condition granted him worldwide fame, it also brought with it a number of health challenges, including chronic pain and mobility issues that intensified with age. Despite Andre's towering legacy, his daughter Robin Christensen Roussimoff does not share his condition. Robin stands at approximately 6 feet tall, certainly tall by average standards, but not medically extraordinary. Unlike her father, there is no indication that her growth was influenced by a hormonal imbalance. In fact, medical literature on acromegaly confirms that the condition is not hereditary. It is caused by non-genetic mutations in pituitary cells and is not passed down from parent to child. Robin's height, though notable, falls within the natural range for tall individuals and lacks any of the extreme physiological traits associated with Andre's condition, such as enlarged hands, feet, or facial features that commonly accompany acromegaly. Interviews and other coverage open to the public do not assert that Robin suffers from an endocrine disorder or requires medical assistance because of issues concerning her growth. Although she discusses her early life upbringing and her relationship with her father in interviews, she does not shed any light on the health problems involved with gigantism. The silence speaks volumes, not in terms of avoidance, but rather because this topic may be of little relevance to her personal health. And there have been no serious reports or medical disclosures that would apply any conditions to her that would resemble her father's diagnosis. Many account for her height as a passing trait of random chance or general genetic factors. Her mother was also reported to be tall, rather than an extension of Andre's medical profile. Robin indeed inherits some elements of her father's dominating physical presence, but there is no factual evidence to indicate that she is suffering from or even carries any trace of the condition that so thoroughly shaped his life and career. Her height, though atypical, is an eligible variation. The absence of acromegaly and its kindred disorders explains all the more her characteristics. The clear distinction between inherited height and hormonally induced gigantism helps to dispel the myths and assumptions about their shared physical characteristics. Robin's natural elevation is thus proof of genetic variation and not of medical inheritance. While Robin may have inherited some of Andre's physical traits, what she didn't inherit was the larger-than-life world he lived in, or the place he occupied in hers. Childhood with limited contact. Robin Christensen Roussimoff was born in 1979 to Jean Christensen, a former public relations worker in the wrestling industry, and professional wrestling icon Andre the Giant. While Robin's father was a global superstar, her own upbringing bore little resemblance to the world of glitz and spectacle associated with professional wrestling. Jean raised Robin primarily in the United States, deliberately maintaining a low profile and ensuring her daughter had as normal a childhood as possible. This decision was made in stark contrast to the chaotic, constantly public life Andre lived on the road as one of the most in-demand wrestlers of the 1980s. Despite the fame surrounding her father, Robin grew up in relative anonymity, far from the spotlight that consumed much of Andre's adult life. Robin's personal interactions with Andre were extremely limited. Over the course of her entire life, she reportedly met her father only about 5 times. These rare meetings were typically short and impersonal, as Andre's travel-heavy wrestling schedule made consistent contact difficult, if not impossible. With Andre spending over 300 days a year on the road, there was little opportunity for the kind of father-daughter relationship that might have otherwise developed. In interviews, Robin has shared that she didn't feel much of a connection to him, not out of bitterness, but simply due to the lack of time and emotional bonding. To her, Andre was never really dad in a meaningful way. He remained more of a distant figure from stories and photos than a present parent. Yet, Jean Christensen kept Robin away from the professional wrestling circuit, even though she had an involvement in it. It was not in hatred, but for the preservation of Robin's renown from the pinching reality of being the child of a celebrity. Jean has always had a preference for privacy and normality over fame and exposure, thinking that it is in Robin's best interest if she keeps her out of the wrestling world. Thus, there was hardly any media in Robin's various formative years of her life that might have otherwise defined her youth, backstage wrestling experiences, and the like. This no contact further cemented them apart, emotionally and physically, making their moments encounter become infrequent and brief. Possibly the most touching instant that reflected that distance was the time after Andre's death in January 1993. Robin did not learn of his death through relatives or friends who were close, but rather through one of his lawyers almost a month after his death. The formality and stretching of time by which the message was passed spoke volumes about how disconnected she was from his life then. She was kept at arm's length for most of her childhood because of circumstance as well as by design, though carrying his name and legacy. For Robin, presence influenced her early years more than absence, and that emotional gap would endure in seeing how Andre the Giant was to be defined. Persona versus dad. Robin Christensen-Rusimov has always drawn a clear line between the public image of her father, Andre the Giant, and the man she encountered during the rare moments they spent together. In various interviews, Robin has stated that, to her, Andre was not a wrestling icon or a Hollywood figure. He was simply dad. This distinction may seem surprising to fans who idolized Andre for his larger-than-life presence in the ring and on screen, but for Robin, her father's fame was distant and disconnected from her reality. Their relationship, limited in time and depth, wasn't built around his celebrity, but rather existed in small, ordinary exchanges. To her, the myth never overshadowed the man, largely because she never saw much of either. This emotional detachment from Andre's superstar persona wasn't the result of indifference, but rather of circumstance. Robin was raised far from the spectacle of the wrestling world and saw her father only a handful of times throughout her life. As a result, the elaborate stories, dramatic entrances, and sold-out arenas that defined Andre's public life held little emotional resonance for her. She's spoken candidly about not being caught up in the mythology that surrounded him. Instead, she viewed Andre through a far more grounded lens, as someone she barely knew, not someone she revered. The reality of their limited interaction gave her a perspective that was more human than heroic. Yet these visits, precious in retrospect, were less grand than simple. Robin remembers simple, uneventful moments, sitting on his lap after The Princess Bride was released, or seeing him backstage for a brief moment. Those meetings were not laden with the weight of stardom, and Robin's memory has ambient, as opposed to awe-inspiring ones. This unadorned view allowed her to build a truer impression of him outside of the vacuous fanfare he usually found himself in. While fans will remember Andre as a towering figure filling arenas, Robin would recall their one-on-one moments with a gentle giant. That grounded, unglamorized view of her father has considerably shaped the way Robin deals with the legacy. In fact, she has played a prominent role in documentaries and biographies, not so much to glorify the legend as to humanize the man behind it. Robin should tell the truth about who Andre was, that he could feel lonely and suffer as well as have other personal struggles because of his condition and career. Robin's emotional detachment from his fame allows her to preserve his memory honestly and with integrity, without nostalgia or sensationalism. Thus, he would let the world see not just Andre the Giant, but Andrei Roussimoff, the human being behind the giant person. Beyond the wrestling ring. Although Robin Christensen Roussimoff is the only child of wrestling legend Andre the Giant, she made a conscious decision early in her adult life not to follow in his professional footsteps. At one point, Robin briefly explored wrestling by attending training sessions, likely out of curiosity, or to test whether the profession could offer her a sense of connection to her father. However, she soon realized that the world of professional wrestling, with its intense physical demands and performative storytelling, was not something she genuinely enjoyed or felt comfortable within. Her exposure to the sport was short-lived, and she walked away with clarity about what she wanted and didn't want for her own life. In interviews, Robin has expressed admiration for her father's contributions to the wrestling industry and the cultural impact he made. Yet, she made it clear that replicating his path was never her goal. Rather than trying to imitate or extend his legacy through her own in-ring career, she wanted to honor him in a way that remained authentic to who she is. To Robin, respecting Andre meant preserving his memory, not attempting to become a second version of him. This distinction is significant because many children of celebrities often feel pressure to live up to or continue the public persona of their famous parent. Robin, however, chose a different route, one based on independence rather than imitation. It was the atmosphere of the wrestling industry and the whole culture surrounding it that influenced her greatly in her decision. Growing up mostly outside the world of wrestling, Robin gradually found it hard to fit into the ambiance surrounding the belief and expectation that accompany it. The match ceremony, which is coupled with hard travel to different locations for tournaments and athletic intensity, is anathema to her character and taste. In a business based on an image, hype, and most times family branding, she would be an inevitable subject of comparison with Baguette father. She preferred leaving that shadow or challenging the tradition of Molest Andre and setting off down accessible paths by which to be considered her own person. At the end of the day, Robin's choice not to pursue a career in wrestling was, ultimately, a powerful enactment of self-identity. She could have traded on her surname to achieve some visibility or marketability within that industry, so instead she chose a quieter, duller life that honors her values. The desire not to be described in terms of one's lineage, but by character and authenticity, was behind that choice. Thus, leaving the ring did not mean Robin was renouncing her father's legacy, rather reinterpreting how it may be continued, not by emulation, but through preservation, storytelling, and her personal truth. Protecting the Giant's story. Robin Christensen Roussimoff has taken an active and deliberate role in shaping the legacy of her father, Andre the Giant. Although she has chosen not to pursue a life in the spotlight herself, She has made it her mission to ensure that the public remembers Andre as more than just a larger-than-life wrestling persona. Her most notable contribution came in 2018, when she participated in the HBO documentary Andre the Giant. Produced in collaboration with WWE and director Jason Hehir, the film sought to offer a more nuanced look at Andre's life, his triumphs, pain, and the complex human behind the towering figure. Robin's presence in the documentary added a personal, grounded perspective, giving viewers access to a side of Andre rarely seen by fans. Prior to that, in 2015, Robin was involved in another significant project, the graphic novel Andre the Giant, Closer to Heaven. Written by Brandon Easton, illustrated by Dennis Medry, the graphic novel told the story of Andre's life in an accessible and emotionally resonant format. Robin's support of the book ensured that it didn't merely mythologize her father, but instead captured his humanity, the physical suffering caused by acromegaly, his struggle with fame, and the loneliness that often accompanied his celebrity. Through both projects, Robin helped bridge the gap between Andre's public image and private experiences, making sure his story was told with depth and truth, rather than shallow adoration. Her determination to paint in rainbows and showers intertwines with the broad family commitment to that type of storytelling. Robin has not been shy about letting people know she wants them to understand what her father was capable of in the ring, and what it cost him to become a man of that size in a world not built for him. Her work has countered the impulse to see Andre only as spectacle, making space for the fact that, beyond size, he was a man with real vulnerabilities. Robin has also opposed media projects that explored Andre's emotional complexity, showing her respect for the legacy that honors him, not as a brand for exploitation, but as a life that deserves to be honored truthfully. Robin's approach stands in stark contrast to the media environment that frequently favors drama. She does not seek the limelight for her own personal gain, but enters it when it is time to reflect her father's complete tale to the public. Her limited participation with projects like the HBO documentary and Closer to Heaven can be characterized as discretion and care. She ensures that all portrayals of Andre collectively build a more holistic and respectful understanding of who he was. Robin has become not only the keeper of her father's memory, but also one of the most able advocates for the truth regarding legacy building with this careful stewardship. While she worked tirelessly to preserve his public legacy, a far more personal reckoning was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. Emotional journey after losing him. Robin Christensen-Russimoff's emotional journey after the loss of her father, Andre the Giant, is one marked by distance, confusion, and ultimately, compassion. The last time Robin spoke with Andre was in late 1992, just weeks before his death in January 1993. Their relationship, already fragile and infrequent due to Andre's constant travel and demanding wrestling career, had little time to evolve into anything resembling a traditional bond. At the time of their final conversation, Robin was still a teenager, and the exchange, while significant in hindsight, did not offer closure or insight into what was to come. The brevity and ordinariness of that last communication would take on new emotional weight in the aftermath of his death. Robin did not learn about her father's passing through a heartfelt phone call from family or friends, but instead received the news from one of Andre's lawyers almost a month after his death. The indirect and delayed nature of this revelation intensified the emotional distance she had always felt. It wasn't just the shock of his passing, but the way it was communicated that left a lasting impact. Learning about such a major personal loss in such a detached, formal way reinforced the notion that, despite sharing his bloodline, she had remained on the periphery of his life. The lack of an opportunity to say goodbye or process his passing in real time complicated her ability to grieve in the way most people might expect. She has narratively been in great agony, and as more beautiful years went by, Robin finally started justifying how she came to forgive Andre for not being there during her raise. For the first time, she began to figure out the gory ends of his lifestyle, where he had spent a whole lot of his years on tour, unending physical suffering from acromegaly, all those hollow moments in a career built around a character and not a personal life. Instead of tapping into anger, she recognized the condition that limited them to those things. This is evident through interviews and public reflections that Robin says haven't come easily, but over time, due to perspective and knowledge of the real essence through which her father lives. The grieving process for Robin mostly consisted of learning more about who Andre really was, both performer and person suffering from lifestyle illness and fame. Projects such as HBO's documentary Andre the Giant helped to explore his immense legacy. Beyond the ring, it tells, in contrast, more about his tangled life, assembling the stories of an army who knew him and a life full of triumph and struggle, has helped Robin learn to grieve actively and elegantly. The powerful contrast of the road ahead could demonstrate that understanding and compassion can be healing. Although closure may never exist in some cases, financial legacy and estate management. When Andre the Giant passed away in January 1993, he left behind not only a legacy in the wrestling world, but also a substantial estate, all of which was willed to his only child, Robin Christensen Roussimoff. Though their personal relationship had been minimal and strained, Andre made a definitive statement through his will by naming Robin the sole heir to his estate. The assets were placed in a trust, with the provision that she would gain full control upon reaching the age of 30. This legal arrangement ensured Robin's financial security later in life, even though she had little emotional connection with the man who provided it. It was a gesture that, while distant, spoke volumes about Andre's acknowledgement of his responsibility as a father. During Robin's early years, her connection to Andre was mostly through legal and financial channels. The courts had mandated child support payments from Andre, which reportedly ranged from $750 to $1,000 per month. These payments were not part of a voluntary arrangement, but were the result of a paternity suit that confirmed Andre as Robin's biological father. Despite his limited involvement in her life, Andre did meet his financial obligations. For Robin, this support was not just economic. It was the only consistent form of acknowledgement she received from a father who was largely absent. While the payments did not bridge the emotional gap, they served as a formal recognition of their familial bond. Andre's estate encompassed an interesting, if eclectic, combination of assets that mirrored his extreme stature and international notoriety. These included the royalties from his wrestling engagements, licensing fees, and merchandising such as action figures, video games, and clothing with his likeness. In any case, his work in the movies, notably The Princess Bride, and international wrestling competitions in Japan and Canada further enhanced the value of his estate. These income sources continued to generate revenues for many years after his passing, endowing the estate with a lasting source of material benefit to Robin. Though as a minor she had no say over it, she was to become, in due course, the sole heir and the person responsible for managing the legacy of one of wrestling's very icons. Even though Andre may not have been a father in the traditional sense, his financial support for Robin served as a legal and formal recognition of the bond between them. The trust, payments for child support, and inheritance established that even though they shared no strong personal tie, she was indeed his daughter. Over the years, Robin embraced the responsibility that came with that inheritance, preserving her father's memory with a certain care and respect. A source of income, The estate became a forum for Robin to come to terms with the distance between them and ensure that her father's legacy was honored in a meaningful way. Balancing spotlight and solitude. Robin Christensen Rusimoff has built a life rooted in privacy, choosing a quiet and measured existence in Seattle, far from the limelight that once surrounded her father, Andre the Giant. Despite being the only child of one of wrestling's most legendary figures, Robin has made a conscious decision to stay out of the media spotlight unless the occasion directly relates to preserving her father's legacy. She does not maintain a public-facing social media persona and rarely grants interviews, preferring to live life on her own terms. This low public profile reflects her personal values, rooted in independence, authenticity, and emotional clarity, and helps her maintain control over how her father's story is told. Although Robin avoids regular media exposure, she does make occasional public appearances, particularly at wrestling conventions and fan events dedicated to honoring Andre's life and career. These events often attract devoted fans who view Andre the Giant as more than just an athlete. They see him as a cultural icon. Robin's presence at these gatherings adds a personal dimension to the legacy, offering fans a chance to connect with someone who shares a direct link to the man behind the legend. She doesn't attend these events frequently, but when she does, her involvement is clearly motivated by a desire to respectfully represent her father rather than to seek personal fame or recognition. Robin is quite different from other children of public personalities by her mature sense of public life. He does not like to use his father's name or legacy for profit or publicity. Instead, she tries to involve herself in events and projects that would paint Andre in a balanced and true light. Her work is grounded in a real desire to protect and promote the full humanity of her father. Robin said in interviews involving her participation in documentaries, like HBO's Andre the Giant, and her attendance at tribute events. In Robin's case, her name cannot be used in branding or in grabbing attention for herself. Her presence is always steeped in respect, education, and connection with fans who still respect her father. Robin is often found at conventions in attendance on various Q&A panels where memorabilia is signed, and she shares and recounts tales of Andre's life, the known and also the deeply personal. But even there, she is careful to keep boundaries. Overstepping the mark into too private a speculation or not sharing enough, she keeps her comments to honoring the memory of her father while retaining her own sense of privacy. By these acts, fans have expressed glory in the sincerity and grace with which she administers such appearances. By carefully selected and intentional public interaction, Robin carved for herself a meaningful role as the custodian of a legacy and as an individual with her own voice and boundaries, distinguishing myth from man. Robin Christensen Rusimoff has taken on a unique and often underappreciated role in the public memory of her father, Andre the Giant, that of myth breaker. In many of her rare interviews and public appearances, she is intentional about sharing stories that highlight Andre's humor, humility, and kindness, traits that are frequently overshadowed by the spectacle of his physical stature. While the world often remembers Andre for his towering height and legendary strength, Robin reminds fans that he was also a man with a gentle demeanor, a strong sense of loyalty, and a playful sense of humor. These humanizing details serve as a powerful counterbalance to the often larger-than-life tales that dominate his legacy. One of Robin's consistent concerns is the way fans and media tend to mythologize Andre, focusing on stories that exaggerate his size and physical capabilities at the expense of his humanity. While tales of him drinking hundreds of beers or lifting cars have become folklore, Robin has emphasized that these stories, though entertaining, often reduce her father to a caricature. She doesn't deny that Andre's physical presence was extraordinary, but she believes that turning him into a legend robs him of his complexity as a person. Her goal is to shift the focus away from hyperbole and toward the nuanced reality of the man who lived with daily physical pain, emotional isolation, and the burden of constant attention. Departing from mythological grandeur, rather, Robin offers intimate, anecdotal, and often second-hand stories that portray him as a very human, relatable, and even emotionally rich individual. She recalls family members and friends relaying incidents in which Andre cracked jokes backstage or quietly helped others without much fanfare. These were the stories that spoke of kindness in everyday life, far more than any wrestling hold or film appearance ever could. Robin knows storytelling is shiny. Therefore, she chooses which story to tell in reclaiming the narrative of her father. Instead of leaving the memory of her father solely in the hands of fans or promoters, she ensures that the image contains the father, the friend, and the man beyond the myth. Behind every legend is a silence only family can fill, and Robin has spent years listening for what was never said. Legacy through a daughter's eyes. Robin Christensen Rusimoff's understanding of her father, Andre the Giant, is rooted in a combination of personal memories and reconstructed narratives shared by others. One of her most cherished recollections involves sitting on Andre's lap shortly after the release of The Princess Bride, a moment that stands out not because of its grandeur, but because of its intimacy. For Robin, who had only a handful of in-person interactions with her father, this brief memory serves as a tangible connection to a man whose life was largely defined by distance. It's one of the few first-hand experiences she holds on to, a gentle, fleeting moment that has stayed with her through the years. With such limited direct contact, much of Robin's understanding of her father has come from external sources. Family members, close friends, and people who worked with Andre during his wrestling and film careers. Backstage stories from fellow wrestlers and crew members have provided her with glimpses of her father's demeanor, his sense of humor, and the way he carried himself when the cameras were off. These accounts, shared over time and across settings, have helped Robin piece together a picture of who Andre really was outside of his fame. She also treasures family photographs, some posed, others candid, as a way to visualize the emotional connection that was never fully developed in real life. Robin has often observed how this emotional reconstruction process has impacted her identity and her understanding of fatherhood. Her perception of Andre is not based entirely on personal memories, but rather a mix of real experiences and second-hand stories whose reconciliation she has attempted. If you enjoyed this look into the untold side of Andre the Giant's legacy, make sure to like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that go beyond the spotlight. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. And while you're here, go ahead and click the next video on your screen. You won't believe what happened next in the world of wrestling legends.